Hello, and thanks for joining us. My name is still Ian Stroud.
And I'm David Malone, and this is Hyperland.
I'm talking about holidays again.
Again, you're going to have to get over it, mate.
I know. But we did an emergency filler for when I was away.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it's going to be a fantastic year for elections, isn't it? We've already had Putin.
Cracker year for elections. It's a get your lazy boy and a big tub of popcorn out this year, mate. I mean, I know some people are going to, as the phrase goes, lose their shit.
Yes.
But for the rest of us, it's just going to be so entertaining.
Well, I suppose the big one's the American one, and we touched on that with the two. I don't want to insult Australians. I don't want to insult Americans in their two running.
Like
buffoons.
we said, 270 million, and those are the best two they come up with.
How did you describe Trump? That made me laugh myself.
Orange kumquat.
It still makes me laugh. But I think the jungle drums that I'm hearing that are coming up in where is it? It's coming up in August in Chicago's the Democratic Convention.
Oh yeah, the convention.
And it seems now that it wouldn't be a surprise when Biden steps down.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning this. I hadn't read this article. I mean, you, from the outside, you think they must recognize that he's showing far too many signs.
Yeah.
Which, even if they're not genuinely signs of a man whose mental capacity is beginning to flicker on and off, that it looks like that for such a large number of people that it becomes how those people begin to judge him.
And then I think then the seed of doubt, and then you start looking at the wider picture, and you step back, and he's had problems with the family, and it makes him so. Just in the way our politics is talked, at that level, it's slinging mud.
Well, also, isn't it just slightly odd that you'd have a conversation where the conversation is one person says, I think he's going a bit senile. And the other person says, no, I mean, it's just, he has his moments. And you think, look, that's okay if we're talking about the man who does your lawn.
Yeah.
But this is the man who's...
the big red button.
They carry the nuclear football around with him. I don't want there to be any kind of discussion. I want him to be the kind of person where, the discussion is that his or her days vary between incredibly bright and on it and amazingly bright and on it. Those should be the two kind of days they have.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any discussion about, no, he's not that bad.
Well, the big question would be kind of, well, who is lining up or who has been lined up? And
it's not going to be Kamala Harris.
I was going to say everyone says that, and
yeah, for good reasons.
Go on then. What are the good reasons?
Nobody likes her. Well, it's true. Her whole record when she, was at the lower level in the state.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
She spent her entire time saying, "Oh, well, no, it's not like that. Oh, I didn't know it. No, it looks like that, but it's not going to happen."
Well, the name that has come up is Gavin Newsom, who's the Californian governor.
Yeah, like I said, I hadn't read this article, but that is fascinating because, of course, California is one of the places where all the right-wingers, all the libertarians and they all point at to say, oh, the catastrophe of the blue states.
Well, that's probably,
I can't see... I'm sure you can't become governor of California without having some clout.
Wasn't Schwarzenegger?
Yeah. So, inside the party, the Democrat Party, you could see him being a mover and shaker and having the clout to line up support. But is he the kind of person who can have any kind of crossover appeal, the way that Obama did, for instance? I'm not sure, because there's too many...
Well, I'm not sure, but...
one of the things that gets said is, look at the states where people are moving out and wealthy people are moving out. California is the top of the list.
Yeah.
So, but who else would it be? Yes. But
that touched on the thing that you were talking about in our emergency filler podcast, which is kind of like this. The fear seems to be that if it is Gavin Newsom, that then there is a Californication of I keep saying Australia. There is this spreading of that ideology across the states, which you were kind of sort of saying the opposite. Really,
Yeah, well, I mean,
which is kind of like I can understand and see that kind of quite clear, even if that is a fear that it's that ideology spreads out. Texas isn't going to stand there and go, yeah, oh, bring
well, I
in
mean,
all these.
but now we've got the film Civil War,
Yeah, yeah,
and I haven't seen it yet, but that shows that this is a live subject, which is.
Yeah.
Which people are saying, well, that's interesting. It's tapping into a live thought for them.
Yeah.
It's not that someone made this film and they go, what?
yeah, yeah.
You know. And so, you know, as we talked about in that the filler one that we did, I think you are. I mean, what's really exciting sounds like, oh, I'm so thrilled this is happening. But what's really going to be interesting?
I've got such a cheeky look in your face.
Well, yeah, it's true.
You're so enjoying this.
I am. So it's just going to be a popcorn year.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, I know there are very serious issues at stake,
yeah,
and
of course.
lots of people's lives will be turned upside down. But what else is new?
Yeah.
But there is going to be a divisive election, and unless one side or the other wins by a huge margin, which
this is what you were saying.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Going to be too tight, and therefore the states will react.
I think this is so interesting. It's going to be so because the power of feds versus states is what American history has been driven by. Well, underneath that is the thing.
This is exactly what you were talking to me, and I just can't make sense of it. It was you described it as this empire, imperial building.
Okay,
crown
now
wearing.
Now you're talking about the conversation we had at dinner the other night.
Yeah,
I didn't say. Yeah, I mean, okay, that's a separate thing. But since you've raised it, I mean, they're related. What I mean is this: that people have been talking about.
Okay, well, no.
Sorry.
Let's. I don't want you. I don't want to conflate two different.
No, they're the same issue. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll start with the states and the Fed.
Okay. It has been from the moment America became America, it has been the tension in American politics.
Yeah.
When America became America, when they had the War of Independence, the revolution, then one party were called the Federalists.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the big argument was how much power should this new entity, the federal level, have? Because what you'd had is separate states, and they were really quite separate, partially because they kept splitting along religious lines, which is why you have this little line of increasingly small states, because they would all be living in New York, and then some New Yorkers would say, well, we don't like your religion, so we're moving north, and we're going to found Delaware, and then from Delaware they'd go, we don't like that. So you got these little states going up the East Coast. And so the states were really jealous of, well, Pennsylvania is where the Quakers are, it's Pennsylvania. And New York, well, we're not. And then Delaware's different. And,
and if you go down south.
And Vermont, and exactly. So they're all very, very different and very jealous of their powers.
Yeah.
Which is why, for instance, when they were having this big discussion, no one was going to allow the new capital to be in their state, which is why the capital isn't in a state. It's in its own little place, the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
So, because they said, well, we're not having it in Virginia. And the Virginians said, well, fine, but we're not having it in New York. And so... it's been the thing. And then they create this new entity, which for people who said, why do we need it? We're happy in Virginia. We're Virginians.
Yes.
Or we're happy and they said, but we need to have something that makes us all together, the 13 states.
An overlapping.
And the opposite would say, well, so you're just going to replace the British Parliament with another remote group of people who they're not from Virginia.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the big discussion. How much power should the federal level have? And that has always been what has been such a strong river running through all of American history.
Yeah.
It was there in the Civil War. It was there in the Civil Rights Movement,
And
we've got these Northerners coming down and, so it's always been there.
And it's here. It's here in the UK,
Well, okay, but not nearly. That is this state versus federal power is one of the central drivers of American history, even if on the surface it's dressed up in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to happen again. Because as we said in that filler one, you can already see it. With the border.
The competition between California and Texas, for example.
Or Texas versus the feds. I mean, the Texas government says pretty much, he said, this isn't the United States border.
Yeah.
So the US officials, the feds, can just piss off.
Yeah.
This is the Texas border, and we're going to police the Texas border the way that we do in Texas.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can already see this. So now you have a narrowly contested election. Someone wins by 1% or 0.5%. And because the sides are so ideologically far apart, whichever one wins, they start saying, right, we're going to do whatever it is they think, to make it sort of hyperbolic. One side says, right, we're going to open up the borders and everyone from South America is welcome. And the other side says, we're going to build a fucking great big wall and put barbed wire and landmines on both sides. Whichever one happens, the other side are not going to be happy. And they said, you didn't really get a mandate from nearly half of the country.
Yeah. This is illustrated.
And I think what's going to happen is, or at least it's one distinct possibility, that you will see another shift in that several centuries old settlement of the relative power of states. And you might start getting, hence the interest in this film, Civil War, that states start saying, fine, your side won the federal level. We can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
But now at the state level, we're going to start to grasp more and more of powers which we used to say, well, that's the feds who decide that. We're going to go, no. We don't like the feds.
Yeah.
We'd never agreed with this, with their mandate.
And that's illustrated in the Roe and Wade abortion.
Exactly. Abortion, borders, but I think it'll grow.
Yeah.
And that then becomes not just an election that had an outcome.
Yeah.
But the outcome of that election and the knock-on effect could be a new historical moment, a change in this power. And
it's dominoes toppling. Isn't it?
And it's the United States of America. Well, how united will they be? Will you end up being that they'll become more like Europe is? It's not the United States of Europe, is it? And no one talks about it that way because the power still resides very much within the countries. What happens if America starts going there and you start getting a kind of balkanization of America?
Yeah.
And then this gets to this other bit, the imperial bit.
Yes, this is the bit I couldn't, because actually what you were
that's
describing...
just because you'd had 2 pints of Guinness, man.
2 full pints. No, your description, it kind of made sense to be the opposite of what you were trying to explain to me.
Okay, well, so I may
try again.
Yeah, I mean,
I've had a coffee, not Guinness.
I mean, it may be the reason you didn't understand it is because it didn't make sense.
Okay.
I'm not making sense. I'm trying to work these things out as I go.
Yeah.
But I was reading back about this whole idea of the American Empire. I bought a book years ago called Sorrows of Empire.
Yeah.
And it was a man who was interested in the power of the American military and was just saying, it's 10 years more ago, this book, just... It was an imperial power.
Yeah. That
there was this other power within the United States, which he just looked at it and said, this is a vast Praetorian kind of power inside America. So that got me interested. And I've been interested in this notion of the American Empire. And of course, people have been talking and writing about the empire since Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
When America sort of said, yeah, we're an actor on the world stage and we're going to go down and kick the Mexicans' asses, or we're going to invade here or do that. And we're going to march into Europe because we're a world power. And there's been this tension. And then after that, people have talked about, are we now seeing the fall of the American empire? In other words, the American empire is being challenged by a Chinese empire. And so there's lots of chat about, is the American empire on the wane? Is it falling apart? And I start to think about this. The word empire is confusing because you can have an empire like the British Empire, or anybody's empire, or the ancient Roman Empire, and that use of the word empire just means a lot of other people's land that you're saying we're in charge of.
Yeah.
So if we make the analogy to Rome,
Yeah.
which is the one everyone always reaches for I think lots of good reasons. The American Empire was like the Roman Empire when Rome wasn't governed by emperors. It was governed by the Roman Senate.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the Roman Empire, when it was governed by a form of democratic rule, there were senators, was nearly as large as the Roman Empire has ever been. They conquered Gaul, they had England, you know.
Yeah.
So it was an enormous empire.
Yeah.
But it wasn't governed by an emperor.
And a single.
So it was an empire governed by a quasi democratic.
Yeah.
I think that's what America has always been.
Yes.
It's been a democratic country. It had, you know, the Congress, you know.
Okay.
But it ran an empire.
Yeah.
All right. But what happened in the analogy with Rome is, at some point, the republic fell apart.
Yeah.
And it got replaced by emperors.
Yes.
The beginning of the Caesars.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, when you look at that transition, you had a period of, I'm not an expert of it, 60 years maybe?
Yeah.
You had the Gracchus, and you had Pompey.
Yes.
And you had Mark Antony, you had the triumvirs, you had Julius Caesar. What you had is a series of what the historians will say strong men.
Yeah.
In other words, and what was interesting is you got one after the other, and sometimes these strong men would be on the side of the poorer classes within Rome.
And other times
and they would,
after.
but each side would become slightly more autocratic,
right,
and slightly more. We've got to save
the poor people,
Rome. We've got to save the empire.
Yeah,
and they wanted to do it by having more power, which they then took away from the Senate.
Yeah,
so that they could do what was necessary, and then they'd be replaced by another strong person who was more on the side of the wealthy, and they would grab more autocratic power.
Yeah,
and each side thought they were saving the Roman Empire, but collectively, from centuries afterwards, you said, well, each time they did this,
it crumbled.
They chipped away a little bit more of anyone's faith in the Senate.
Yeah.
Until you get to the point where everyone's going,
yeah.
This democratic rule by the Senate isn't working, is it? What we need is, and someone stepped up and said, an emperor, me.
This is what I think. This is where I got confused.
Okay.
I thought you were sort of saying, now is the time that we're going to start seeing these strong men.
No, we've had it. Look,
we've had it. Okay,
Obama was
hallelujah.
Bush was a strong man. Bush W. I mean, he was a numpty, but he was a strong man.
Yes, I thought you were saying now is the start of the strong man.
No,
this is the end of.
Yes, we've had this period of one strong, because Obama comes along and said we had all these dreadful things I disagree with, and you had a large number of presidential decrees, which is. It's allowed for within their strip, but the more of those you have, the more it's like, I'm going to ignore Congress and I'm just doing this, and I'm going to make this a presidential decree, and
that
then
makes sense.
and
That
then
makes sense.
And then Trump comes in and does the same. And then Biden comes in, and either he does it or his wet nurse does it for him, and they do, and so I think. Standing from outside and not taking sides and saying, well, I'm glad Obama did these things that were great, or the other side says, well, I'm glad that Trump did these things because they were great.
Yeah.
Both sides are chipping away at anyone's belief in the Congress and the democratic principle. And they keep saying, no, what we need is a strong leader to do something.
No, we don't.
But are we seeing, therefore, not the fall of the American empire, but the fall of the American republic, and potentially the transition to the American empire, the rise of the imperial phase. So the empire they had, but we've gone from an empire run by some democratic version to an empire run imperially. And I'm not saying that Trump or anyone like him will get himself a big gold throne and a crown, and like Napoleon, put it on his head and said, I am the emperor.
Yeah.
But a radical shift, radical even if it happens by degrees or behind the scenes, where it starts to become an imperial power. And what I mean by that is I don't expect there to be a man with a toga. I don't expect to see Trump with a toga and a crown, but you would get, if you put these two things that we've been discussing together, what you end up with is the people's power devolves down to the states, closer to them. Yes. And then you have this imperial power, which exists and is very powerful, but is no longer really connected to how the people govern themselves in their home states, but is still very potent as an imperial power that runs an empire.
Yeah.
And what do you need for that? You need a military and you need
finance.
control of the currency.
Yeah.
Now, imagine the states start to rebel, saying, "Look, we're going to police our borders. We're going to decide what happens, whether you can teach evolution or you can teach identity politics in our schools." And one state says yes, one state says so. Those decisions devolve down to the state level because they say, right, we're having all this power back from you, feds. We're doing it here. Yeah. And then the imperial level says, all right, but we've got the army, the world's most potent military force, and we've got the currency, which if that goes under, you can kiss all of your asses goodbye, and that's all we need.
Yeah.
Now, I it's such a big idea. Certainly, I haven't got any kind of proof. I'm just saying, I see that as one really interesting scenario, which this election, you could say, well, this could be the bit where it starts to, the avalanche starts.
Yeah.
And that's before we even talk about the other elections. So you can see why I'm going to invest in a lazy boy and a popcorn. Big time. It's going to be fantastically interesting.
Well, you mentioned Napoleon, and they've got elections coming up, haven't they?
Les Français.
Which, I mean...
it's going to be another great one.
Macron's not liked, is he?
No, he's a knob.
And
I mean, I talked to my friends for ages when I was out there before the election, and my friends they're all either peasants or they're working class. They work in factories or they work in public works on the roads and whatnot. And I said, and their father was a communist. He was my best friend, Henri. And I said, Who are you going to vote for? And they said, and Mark, who I was speaking to, Mark's the eldest son. I mean, eldest son, he's older than me.
Yeah.
He said, and he turned to me and he held his nose and said, Macron. Because he said, I can't bear to vote for Le Pen.
Yes.
Because he knew his father would rise up from his grave and come and kick his ass.
Yeah.
But he said, I don't like Macron. And he said to me, we'll vote, and he meant France, we'll vote for Macron. And he said, within 18 months, we'll be rising up against him. And of course, the Gilets jaunes did exactly that.
Yeah.
So I thought, Mark was right.
So under Le Pen, though, because Le Pen's not...
Le Pen is but the interesting thing is we've got this fellow,
young
Jordan Bardella. He's been elected as the Rassemblement National, Marine Le Pen's party, as their president, and they overwhelmingly elected him. I think he got over 80% of the vote, and he's seen much like it's like Trudeau.
I was going to say
exactly. Yeah. He's young. He's charismatic.
Yeah.
He's good looking, and he has. I mean, he grew up in the banlieue of Paris. I think his mother was Italian or something.
Right.
So he has all of the right credentials.
Yeah.
Whereas Macron is a Goldman Sachs banker.
Yeah.
With a gold bar shoved up his backside. Never mind a silver spoon. And so, he's got. And so I think there's a really strong chance that A, Macron loses, and B, Marine Le Pen might do really well against it, in part because people are looking at Bardella.
And he may come through.
He might come through to replace her eventually, or they're just saying, look, we'll vote for them because Bardella will be...
Yeah.
You could imagine a scenario where Bardella becomes the prime minister and Marine Le Pen becomes the president.
That, I mean, if you said that, like
one or t'other,
yeah,
you could have Bardella could become, and if the
what's happened in the last, what?
Well, I mean, lots and lots of things. You can't talk about what's happened in Europe. It's such a big place, and so many different things going on. But certainly, two things have carried on. One, there's continued to be rumblings about mass immigration.
Yeah,
and it doesn't matter what your view is, whether you think this is a reasonable thing or the world's worst thing you've ever heard.
Yeah.
Regardless, it is a thing across Europe.
Yeah.
And the other thing, particularly in France, but now spreading, is the farmers. And I mean, I lived on and off. I spent a lot of time in France through my mid-20s, mid-30s, every year, I mean, a third of the year.
Yeah.
And I can, on my experience, I would say to everyone very clearly, do not mess with French farmers. They will kick your ass. They kicked mine on various occasions. I mean, they're not a revolutionary class. That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
They're actually socially conservative. They're
I
not
was going to say,
trying.
they're more sort of like, just leave things the way they are. They're fine.
Exactly.
Just stop moving. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
They're not actually vive la révolution.
Yeah.
Oh, but even that, then a lot of that French Revolution wasn't. We want to bring about this revolutionary new
change.
settlement.
Yeah.
That's why. That's where the French Revolution went wrong. It's that the farmers are a potent political, and they will get on their tractors and come and spray your house with manure.
Yeah, they've done that.
They do.
Not here, but yeah.
And they'll block. They're a potent force.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of them. That's the difference between farming here, where there are hardly any small farms.
Yeah.
France, there are a lot of small farms still.
And they will come together.
And they will rise up, but they're not rising up to bring about the millennium or a communist paradise.
Yeah.
They say, we want you to piss off and
leave
let
us
France
alone.
carry on being France.
Yeah.
And they are now caught. The European Union has constructed this idiotic vice in which they are squeezing French farmers and everybody else's farmers. On the one hand, they say, we really want to do something about the environment. We want to stop using all these pesticides, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it's not that simple, because the European Union,
And
as it says that, starts saying yes to anything that,
But also at the same
wants to
time,
do.
they're sort of saying we want cheap food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can have one
Or
or
the
the other.
Yeah.
But for some mind-bogglingly stupid reason,
Yeah.
they're trying to have both. And what happens is it just crushes between, because your costs are now going to go up because you can't use this, or you can't use that, or you must use more of the other, or you must have this extra thing you're doing. And at the same time, we're going to allow cheap imports from Ukraine and anywhere else to come crashing in.
Yeah.
And you can't, either one. You can either have globalization,
Yes.
open borders for goods, or you can have this environment, but you can't have both. And the more they do this, the more this is going to spread. The French farmers are not going to back down.
Yeah. Well,
And other people's farmers are not going to back down.
Yeah, no, I hope the UK farmers don't.
The UK farmers are a different bunch, because, people talk about the NFU, the National Farmers Union. The National Farmers Union doesn't represent
The smaller farmer,
hayseed with,
Well, I told you, I looked at everyone sort of thinks, oh, the farmers are fine. They get these. They used to get the farming grants. I did a bit of research, and at the time, the top person receiving the largest grant was Tate & Lyle.
Yeah, first,
And
exactly.
probably Bernard Sumner. What's his name?
Yeah, yes,
Turkey Man.
Turkey Man. Yeah,
Not Bernard Sumner's.
Matthews.
Yes, that's.
Yeah.
I'm confusing my new order with my turkey.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you're looking at I mean, you've described what you think might happen in the States, or a direction the States is going in. We've got in Italy, we've got in Hungary,
Meloni in Italy,
yeah.
who before she was elected,
she
she's the
was
devil.
gonna-
It's
yeah,
dreadful.
yeah.
Swing to the right. She gets elected. She tones down the anti-Europe rhetoric.
Yeah,
Carries on with the anti-immigration rhetoric.
Yeah.
And you can find half a dozen pictures of Macron and everybody else shaking a hand and welcoming her.
yeah,
They just wanted a slightly less anti-Europe rhetoric. That's
Right.
all. Everything else was negotiable.
So where's Europe going then? Where are we heading?
Well, Europe is, the common parlance is to say they're swinging to the right. I actually object to that.
Okay,
They are, but it's definitely changing. It's definitely changing, and questions about the scale of immigration and how it should be, and there are questions about European unity, and questions about, interestingly, where that power should be between Europe and the States.
yeah. No, that's
And you've got what's his name in Hungary.
Yeah.
Everyone's bête noire.
Yeah.
So
well, and you've got Putin and Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
At the
So
background.
and what are the elections we've got? The American election, the French election, our election.
Oh, we haven't even spoken about that.
So I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, imagine if France, even if they don't elect Marine Le Pen, but let's say that it's so close that it drags the whole political discussion closer to
Yes.
the Rassemblement National,
Yeah.
Marine Le
Well,
Pen
which
and
it
Bardella.
has done. Yeah.
But let's say it happens more, let alone if they actually win something.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole one view of the whole European project. I mean, if you go back and read all the stuff that was written in the build-up to the EU, it was always said, well, we need some way to stop France and Germany having wars.
Yeah.
And it is that power between France and Germany.
Yeah, yeah.
And imagine if one of the big two swings, to the right.
Yeah.
That is seismic change for Europe. So I just think it will be fantastic. This year, it's just going to be so interesting. And it's going to...
You're so happy.
Well, I am happy because, I mean, I can explain...
Ultimately, yes.
I can explain it best why I'm so smiley about all of this.
When
I talk about the English election, because everyone says, and always have, and don't forget, I've fought in my tiny little way 2 elections, standing as the Green candidate, which is like,
Yes. Well, we can...
Neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But...
We won't do justice to it in
No, but
this
all I'm going
podcast,
to say is that everyone says, and I understand the sentiment, we must vote for Labour to get the Tories out.
Yes.
And I understand that. But my view has always been, and it's becoming more so, is that what I see is it's not that, there's a Tory system and we've got to get it out to have a different system.
Yeah.
I think there is a system and it has 2 essential parts. The system only works when there are 2 parts.
There's the pressure builds up
under
and the pressure
Tories.
releases.
Yeah. It's like a steam engine. That thing that whizzes round.
Yeah.
And when the pressure gets too great, it whizzes around faster and faster, lifts up the weight, and the steam comes out. And that's what the Labour Party has become. And so when you vote for Labour, you're merely doing the other essential part of perpetuating the system.
Yeah.
Now I understand, and that's...
yes, I know. It's a difficult thing to get across without people going...
I'm not in favour of keeping the Tories in.
No.
But I'm even less in favour of perpetuating this
that system,
broken, sclerotic.
Yeah,
it's like an elephant that is diseased and dead, but still stumbling on and stamping on everybody in front of it. And that's what I feel. There's this system which is dying. But it's still got the bulk and strength to stamp on people's lives and has been my entire adult life. I want to see it finally die. And so I think my hope is that Labour gets in, doesn't deliver on any of the things that people think it will do because it's Tory light, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And 4 years from now, the Labour Party looks very much like the Tory party now. And finally, maybe people will say, both of these parties are absolute crap, the entire system. And at that point, maybe we could have a new system. That's what I want. But that's just me. So that's why I look so cheerful.
Who would bring in the new system?
I don't know.
Desperate Labour? I mean, because it's all this sort of first past the post.
I don't know. I mean, I think as these parties split up, you get other groupings who have different ideas. And I've said for a long time, and I still believe it, I'm afraid, that this belief that the way to analyse politics is along this spectrum from left to right, we got that from the turn of the last century.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's any longer the most relevant or enlightening way. It's global and whatever the other side. Yeah. Globalism versus whatever you want to call the other one.
Yeah.
And I think as the left-right begins to break up, both the right party, the Tories, and the supposedly left party, Labour, begin to break up and people begin to go, these parties don't work.
Yeah.
Then maybe they'll say, well, this entire way of looking at things doesn't work. And maybe you'll get groupings. Because there are anti-globalist people within the Tory party and anti-globalist people within Labour. And there are globalists within both.
Yes.
And once you begin to see that the relevant thing is not so much left and right, although it is important, obviously, you could see a party that was made up of anti-globalists from the Tories and anti-globalists from Labour and another party from the globalists from both. And hopefully new parties and new people who haven't yet appeared because no one wants to hear their voice. But if that old settlement does begin to fall away and people are less interested in hearing it,
I think that's happening. I think that's happened. Well, what you're describing is what should have happened in the discussions over the UK leaving the European Union.
Yeah, I mean,
and it never happened.
That was such a depressing because
shoot me.
Both sides chose to fight that debate on the basis of lies, and that's
And fear.
Yeah, but I mean, people don't like that to be said because everyone insists it was the other side who.
No,
lied.
it wasn't.
From outside, I thought both sides based their argument on lies.
Yeah,
and they needn't.
And fear. Lies and fear.
There were genuine arguments both sides could have made, but for some reason, both sides chose to fight on.
Well, let's see. We'll keep an eye on this. So the Democrats in August might be the first. When's the French Revolution?
I'm ashamed to say I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
French election. And God knows when ours is going to be. So,
the Democratic thing will be one. Are they going to really push through and try to use the law to stop Trump?
Yeah.
And for those who want to, they'll go, no, it's not us trying to. They're the laws and some people shouldn't be allowed to run. Okay, I can see that argument, but Trump supporters will just say, you're just making sure our man can't run. And I think that's a bad strategy.
Yeah.
So then those will be the two things,
Yeah.
And then November, it's going to be fab.
Watch this space. Thanks for that, David.